Hey there, welcome back. It's Louisa Munson from Feel Good Astrology, and I'm here to tell you about the fireworks of November. So I've got a whole bunch of notes all hastily scribbled down, and I've got my ephemeris nearby. I've listened to a little bit of ABBA to get me in the mood. Um, and let's just get cracking, shall we? So I've got my ephemeris and whatnot in front of me. Now, I don't know how October was for you, and maybe you're still like working it out. I mean, it's the 23rd, and I'm recording it now, so we still do have another substantial part of the week to go, including the partial lunar eclipse on the 28th, 29th, according to where you are in the world, and that's bound to be something that really provokes a reaction. You know, it's a very, very strong full moon eclipse. um, I'm still feeling the effects of the annular solar eclipse in October on the 14th, so it's pretty strong. I just wanted to get November's forecast out there because there's a lot coming up. I'm going to be doing an update on Helen's channel, that's Venus Health Academy, and also going to be doing another update with Jasmina on her channel. I'll put the details underneath so you can have a look at those as well. I often think the forecasts that have something to do with other people bring out something extra, you know. So I look at these things, you know, and I think, ooh, that looks interesting, you know, and I have a bit of a response to it. But you know, when you're working with other people, also other thoughts come out as well. So I think there's definitely some power in doing that. Now, I've broken it down on a week by week basis. The way I'm thinking about it is that I'm just trying to find my most relevant note. Week one seems to me to be about understanding that love wins out, and I'll explain why. I mean, you know, week one has some really quite jolting energy, but towards the end of it, we get this sense of relief, which feels good. Week two, I think, is bringing up a sense of intensity, and also this feeling that we might be alone, which is never very comfortable. And that's something for us all to deal with. And it's interesting as well, because obviously we are going into this Scorpio time, you know, and, you know, we've got the sun, we've got Mars, we've got Mercury, all in the sign of Scorpio. So, you know, I will be exploring that. Week three, I see as being one that's absolutely about power plays. And then week four, I think, is getting very, very personal. And as I look at this, I'm going to be bringing up one chart for each week to talk about the energies that I can see coming up. So anyway, let's just get cracking. So I'm just going to bring up the ephemeris for week one. So hopefully you can see that nice and clearly. If you've got any questions, by the way, I'm recording this live because it's much easier for me to do it in one go and then not have to worry about editing and whatnot after I've got quite a lot on. So if you do have any questions and I catch you in the chat room, feel free to pop them in and I'll answer them if I can. So in week one, if you have a look, we've got the moon going from Gemini into Cancer, into Leo, and then into Virgo. Now, the Gemini and the Virgo part are just a fraction. So most of the week, the moon is in either Cancer or Leo. Now, I think of these as being very, very emotional and very creative. Like, obviously, the moon in the sign of Cancer is super emotional, really brings us into a feeling of I think vulnerability and tenderness, and it reminds us of where we're belonging, or it gets us asking, where do I belong? You know, really seeking for that kind of feeling. And then by the time the moon is in the sign of Leo, I think we're in quite a creative place. So, you know, some of that emotion has borne out into this feeling of wanting to express. So, you know, I think this is quite an expressive week. That's the first thing to really, really capture. As we're going into it, we've got the rest of the personal planets in feminine signs. So we've got Scorpio Sun, Scorpio Mercury, we've got Scorpio Mars, and we've got Venus in the sign of Virgo. Now, obviously, Mars is in his own sign, in the sign of Scorpio. Mars is very happy there. So, you know, all of our feelings of motivation and energy and vitality are up super high. This is a very strong time for us. Our willpower is higher than usual. Mercury, our thinking is intense. It is really pretty striving. We're really wanting to grow. We're really wanting to kind of force our way. We're wanting to kind of move. The whole energy of Scorpio, as fixed as it is deeply churning. It gets us processing emotions to a certain extent. And then with the sun, in the sign of Scorpio, I mean, I've got a ton of Scorpios in my life. I really attract that energy in. And it is intense. It's burning. It sees everything. It's very insightful, very psychic. So we are going into quite a intense and emotional week in week 1 of November. Now, if we have a look, oh yeah, I didn't comment about Venus in Virgo. Now, Venus is obviously about our flow and our ability to love and connect. And it's also very much about generosity. Virgo is a sign that I think is very much about serving others and things being fit for purpose. So it's not a deeply romantic week, even with all this Scorpio energy going on and with this soppy old moon in Cancer and then in Leo, which is deeply romantic. This is a week where we're wanting to serve others and really wanting to be fit for purpose. So it's almost a self-sacrificing week as well. So I think that energy is quite prevalent. Now, I've brought up the chart for midweek. I just want to run through a couple of the aspects that really intrigue me and I want to comment on. So I haven't really spoken much about the actual moon aspects. Obviously the moon is making aspects all day long, but on the 3rd in particular, one thing that really stands out is this opposition between the sun and Jupiter, which really brings in a feeling of stubborn pride. Obviously Jupiter in the sign of Taurus is quite intractable. Jupiter is about expansion and our attitudes to wealth and sharing in quite a strong respect. It really brings up a feeling that we need opulence and that we need to manage our resources very carefully. And then the sun in Scorpio is really quite fixed in. Both of them are very acquiring. If you think about where they naturally rule, you've got Taurus ruling naturally, having sort of dominion over the 2nd house, and Scorpio over the 8th. Both of them are about values. They're both about money, whether it's our own hard-earned resources or the ones that we share with other people. It's all about values and money. So it's very fixed at this time. We've also got this on the same day, we've got Venus in opposition to Neptune across the Pisces and Virgo polarity, which is very much self-sacrificing and serving others. And both Venus and Neptune are about love and higher love. They are very much of service. So it's interesting that we're talking about, or that there's energies that are about intractable finances, intractable values, whilst at the same time there is this feeling of practical love versus self-sacrificing love. It's quite interesting. I'm wondering what's going on at that time in this first week in particular. The very next day, we've got Mercury in opposition to Uranus, again across the Taurus and Scorpio polarity, which is really, really strong. Mercury is not that comfortable in the sign of Scorpio, although it's very insightful and it really zeroes in on things and wants to go deeply, is really wanting to get underneath things, look at the secrets of things. And then Uranus, which has been in Taurus for ages, is really stirring up our understanding of security with money and security with our resources. At the start, when Uranus went into the sign of Taurus, I recorded quite a few YouTube videos. You can see them. They're in my history. But I was talking about, the fact that I think our financial system is likely to collapse during this time. And really, really change, and not just change, it's going to collapse and then rebuild itself. I mean, like fundamentally change, that currency won't be our physical currency, it will go online. Uranus is very much about being online and things being virtual and things being almost telepathic. Like telepathic money is kind of central currencies, digital currencies. Now, I don't necessarily feel very much in alignment with them, though most of my business is done online. Interestingly, we are all moving in that direction, but is that where we want to go? So I think it's very interesting that we've got these three oppositions with Jupiter, Uranus, and Neptune, slower moving planets to personal planets, across this idea of self-sacrifice and serving others, and also it's mine versus it's ours. It's fascinating, given that there's a lot of given that the media is right now is whipping people up into a frenzy and trying to partition them, trying to separate them. Where we are judging other people, we are being superior towards other people. And right now, as I see it in the media, there is this mass whipping up of people in quite a massive way. I'm also seeing things coming out about vaccines, also things coming out about new waves of viruses and this, that, and the other. To me, it feels like November is all about the fireworks that come from being in this very strong polarity, especially seeing as it's following two eclipses, like the eclipse season of October, and it's got this kick-ass November new moon, which is super duper strong and is in a conjunction with Mars, which is ruling Scorpio. So these are really, really epic times. So this, I think, is big in week one. This feeling of separation that we've got to each other and to our value systems. It's almost like whatever is good and coming into us we're cut off from it. Do we need to stock up? Do we need to get a little bit of cash out and just have it in our reserves? Do we need to stock up on water? Don't want to frighten anyone, but I sure as hell am looking after myself and my family and making sure we've just got a little bit put aside, because this feels a bit dicey to me. Now, as the week goes on, things start to change. So this is why I think love wins out. Whatever we're put under, whatever stresses we're put under, around the 3rd and 4th, around the 6th and then the 7th, we've got this lovely trine energy coming in. So we've got, and you could actually say it's already there, but it perfects as the week carries on. So we've got Venus in a lovely trine to Pluto, and thereby also in a trine to Uranus. So that's a really lovely trine. And I was speaking about this trine in the last set of updates. This lovely Uranus-Pluto trine connecting with all the Virgo planets as they've gone through has been very, very useful. It's given us an opportunity to really transform all of our online potentials and transform ourselves through change. And, over the last month, we've had Mars, we've also had Mercury, we've also had the sun going over. So our personal planets connecting, that's been good. Now we've got the last of these real personal planets, aside from the moon, which goes round obviously once a month, but this is very, very helpful. We've also got Mercury trine Neptune. So Mercury here is making this lovely trine to Neptune. And as the month goes on, obviously, Mars will come in to make more of a trine. The sun will come in. Now, Neptune is obviously about everything that is intuitive, everything that's deeply creative at a much higher level, things that we can't necessarily put our finger on, things that we can sense but can't really tangibly understand. It's very deeply unconscious. It's very difficult to navigate. It's very confusing. It's like the fog. You get a sense of it, but you can't see where it starts and ends. It's like the ocean. You can put your hand in it. You can put your foot in it. You can swim in the ocean. I swim in the ocean quite regularly, but you can't see very far into it. You can't understand the entirety of it. And so Mercury, which allows us to think and communicate and have a real sense of certainty with things from our minds, according to the sign it's in particular, Mercury is connecting up to this. I think this is making us deeply intuitive. This is really connecting us into the unseen world, and it's really getting us to connect into everything that we feel and sense, and to get a much bigger sense of it. So we've got this, we've got these two personal planets then connecting to the unconscious mind. So, Pluto and Uranus here connecting to Venus, really helping us to feel in a transformative and also in a very liberated and free way. And then Mercury helping us to think in a very intuitive way and in an unseen way. So this is very, very strong. To me, this is, we've got Venus and Neptune working here in these energies. This is all about love. So I think even though week one has this very choppy energy, I think by the time we get to the end of week one, we're realizing that there's so much more to our world than what is presented in front of us. I think we go internal and we get to sense what is real for us. So that's as I see week one. Now, week two, let me just see if there's any comments or questions coming in. Nothing yet. So I'm just going to continue. Where am I? Aha. So week two then, what can we look forward to in week two? Well, the first thing to focus on, I guess, is where all the personal planets are. Obviously, these latter planets. For those of you that haven't really checked out the ephemerises, this is all from astro.com, which I really recommend you go and have a look at. If you go halfway down on the homepage, on the right-hand side, you've got the, you can access all sorts of ephemeres or ephemerises, according to how you say it. This is obviously the one for 2023, the year that we're in. So we've got Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, the North Node, the true one, the average one. We've got Lilith, we've got Chiron. But these are the guys that I'm mostly interested in because, as you can see, this doesn't really change much. This is the relative motion and speed of everything. But here we've got the sun, we've got the moon, Mercury, Venus, and Mars. And the sun, we already know, is in the sign of Scorpio, and it moves from 15 to 21 degrees. We've got Mercury, you can see, changes sign into the sign of Sagittarius. Now, as it goes into the 11th, it's already in the sign of Sagittarius, so it's actually changing the day before on the 10th. You can also see Venus is changing signs, so she changes on the 8th from the sign of Virgo into the sign of Libra, and Mars is in Scorpio all week. Now, this is signaling to me that we're changing gear. So if you think of week one, it was Scorpio, Scorpio, Virgo, Scorpio, very feminine signs, not really taking charge and moving forwards or anything like that. Now we've got our thinking planet going into the sign of Sagittarius, which is fiery and philosophical. I have to say, my Mercury's in the sign of Sagittarius. It's not happiest in the sign of Sagittarius. In fact, it's really not the strongest position to have Mercury in, because it's the least mercurial. Like Mercury is about facts and figures and statistics and learning, whereas like the sign of Sagittarius, the Mercury form of, the Sagittarian form of thinking is about philosophical concepts. It's about discussion. It's woolly, none of it is specified. So Mercury's not very happy here. But what this is showing is we're coming out of this very insightful, intuitive way of thinking, and we're now starting to get more generalist, more trying to predict trends. The sign of Sagittarius is very much about the future, and we're very philosophical. We're trying to see things from many different perspectives. So not from a factual position, but to be fair, is there such a thing as a hard fact? We're led to believe there are, and yet I'm still aware that everyone sees things from a different perspective. So yeah, we are going into a perspective-based sort of mentality or shift. Then Venus is coming out of the sign of Virgo, which is not that comfortable, and going into the sign of Libra. So this is great because Venus rules the sign of Libra, and so she's very happy. She's going into a graceful time, a time where she's more loving, more able to show generosity, find a sense of balance and democracy and diplomacy. So we're less wanting to sort of bend over and flex and kind of give everything to everyone, which is very much the Venus in Virgo way of being, but we're actually quite measured. Venus in Libra yeah, it's about balance, but it's definitely not going to overgive. It's going to give gracefully, and it's going to give where there's value and meaning to. It's very beautiful in that respect. It's very graceful. And then we still got like the sun and Mars in the sign of Scorpio, still quite thrusting. So there is a bit of a change in gear. So these intense feelings are giving way to a more philosophical way of thinking and a more loving generosity. I would say there's less blame and more acceptance. That said, let's have a look at the key aspects in week 2. Now, in week 2, which goes from the 8th to the 14th, we've got the new moon. And this is the chart for the new moon in Scorpio, which is sizzling. And I would say if you're born around the time of the 13th, or have anything around 20 degrees in the sign of Scorpio, this is a very, very deep and active new moon for you. In fact, it's quite useful, I would say, to look at where 20 degrees in the sign of Scorpio falls in your birth chart. For me, it's in my first house. For you, it could be anywhere. Have a look at your own chart and check and find out where it is, and to see where that new moon energy is coming in and where you might want to focus your energy. So anyway, I'll come to the new moon in a second. So on the 10th, on the 8th, Venus is changing signs into the sign of Libra. But, I don't really see that as eye-popping or eye-watering. What I really wanted to pull your attention to is on the 10th, we've got Mercury changing signs into the sign of Sagittarius. Now, here's the thing. We're coming into this Sagittarian time, and we've got Saturn sat right on the cusp between Aquarius and Pisces at 0 degrees. And obviously, everything that's coming into the sign of Sagittarius right now, until Saturn moves out of this position, it's going to go into a square with Saturn. And Saturn squares are particularly difficult to work with, I have to say. If you can hear kids shouting in the background, it's because I've got 3 kids and we work from home, we play from home. So there's a lot going on all the time. Anyway, Mercury, as it changes signs and goes into the sign of Sagittarius, immediately goes into a square with Saturn. Now, Saturn shows us where our restrictions are, where we feel there are rules, and these rules, in particular with a square, with Saturn, we feel restricted because of tightness, rules, authority, where things aren't a good fit for us, where we feel very much out of sorts. Saturn is quite a lonely figure. Saturn, if you looked at the god Saturn or Titan or anything, or Kronos, whatever you want to consider as the sort of Saturn energy, you'll get this very kind of rigid, lonely figure that shoulders the weight of all the responsibility. Saturn is about responsibility. It's about that sort of painful dedication. Now, if you're lucky, you'll have some good Saturn stereotypes and people in your midst. They could be lovely parents. They could be great mentors, supporting people that help you move into a new position. But not all of us have that. Most of the Saturn archetypes that we see are the negative expressions, which is judgmental, critical, kind of damning almost, putting guilt and shame on people because people aren't behaving enough. Saturn is very much about managing behavior. And so the energy of Saturn in a square to Mercury on the 10th is really bringing out this feeling of, are we communicating correctly? Are we going to get pulled up on how we're communicating, on what we're sharing, especially seeing as Mercury's changing signs. And when any planet changes signs, I think it starts to let out a kind of interesting vibration. So it takes a good day or two for a planet to really get into the energy of the new sign. And Sagittarius, it's quite open in the way it communicates. So like the Sagittarius is like the foot in mouth. I think people are likely to explode their opinions onto the internet and then get a bit of a slap wrist. This is a very strong slapping down of energy. So watch out for that on the 10th, because at the same time, we'll also have the moon. Now, this is obviously on the 13th, but the moon is up here and it's in opposition to Chiron. So the 10th, with moon in opposition to Chiron, that also makes us feel a little bit lonely or a little bit isolated. So the 10th isn't a really great day in terms of communicating and feeling connected. So if I was in your shoes, if you got something big to do on the 10th, find a way to feel connected, find a way to feel supported. So that's my first big day that I wanted to point out. Then on the 11th, we've got Mars in opposition to Uranus. Now, this is explosive. Mars is all about vitality and push. Mars is a very warlike planet. Obviously, it's known as Aries, according to whether you're Greek or Roman. And it also rules the sign of Aries and Scorpio. So Mars is really full on. It can be seen as aggressive. It shows anger. It shows positive direct action, taking action. It's very male in its process. And this maleness, or this very strong direct moving energy, is in opposition to Uranus, which is about change and chaos and a break and a shock and a surprise. Uranus is also about consciousness, which is great, and it's very forward thinking, but it creates a new situation. So these kind of situations where you've got Mars and Uranus in opposition, or Mars and Pluto in opposition, I always get a little bit nervous at, because it's very explosive and really powerful. Mars in opposition to Uranus is more explosive. And then if you also have a look, you'll see that both of them are loosely in a square to Saturn as well. So, this Saturn square energy is huge. So this is, the 10th to the 11th is big. The next date that I'm fascinated with is the 13th, which I've already mentioned. This is the date of the new moon in Scorpio. Now, as you look at it, you can see the moon and the sun are at 20 degrees in the sign of Scorpio. You've also got Mars at 22 degrees. You've got Uranus at 21 degrees in opposition to all of those. You've also got Ceres at 24 degrees. Now, Ceres is also known as Demeter or Mother Nature. You could consider her to be like Mother Earth. The energy of managing and nurturing and raising and protecting is all covered under the Ceres remit. Ceres also shows where we're multitasking, because if you think of Mother Earth, if you think of Mother Nature, if you think of a mum or a dad, anyone that's actively protecting vulnerable people or beings, they're always doing a multitude of things at the same time. So we've got a lot going on that we're trying to manage, whilst there's this very direct need to take action in quite a surprising and sudden way that is affecting the emotions, i.e. the feelings, represented by the moon, and also our personalities, and our ego, represented by the sun. Now, in transactional analysis, if you were to look at astrology, you would say the moon represents a child, the sun represents the adult, Saturn represents the parents and the governments and the controlling factions. It's kind of interesting that we've got this energy going on. The young and the children and the adults could be forced to take action, or may feel like they're taking action. And parents, given that Ceres is also here, it's a new moon that is wanting to take action against everything that is surprising or unpredictable. So this is explosive firework energy as far as I can see. Now, if you're translating this into your own birth chart, so I gave the example of it being in my first house at the time of the new moon. It's roughly here. The first house is about your identity. Like, new moons are about new starts, fresh impetus. For me, I'm thinking, okay, it's time that I get myself on a bit of a diet or a health kick, or I need to start looking after my body. I need to start looking after my appearance a little bit. I need to think about how I come across, which is all very much first house stuff. What is my personality saying? What am I transmitting out to the world? The first house is also about boundaries. But, if this is happening in your seventh house, this is about other people and how you relate to other people in your life. So if you want to know how the new moon is going to affect you, and in fact the full moon, which is in week 4, then please also have a look at my horoscope breakdown, which I'll be launching later on this week. I'll probably run it live as well. But I will be giving you specific advice as to what you might focus on around the time of the new moon. But suffice to say, it's a very, very powerful new moon. And given that the ruler of Scorpio, which is in, Mars is right here in the sign of Scorpio, in this conjunction with the moon and the sun. This is a really, really powerful new moon, possibly the most powerful new moon of the year. It's really strong. I should also say, the other ruler of Scorpio is Pluto. Pluto is in a sextile with Mars. Pluto is also in a sextile with the sun and the moon at the time of this new moon as well. So we've also got Pluto's energy coming into this. So this is a very, very, very strong day to create an intention and to start moving forwards with a new possibility for yourself. The last thing I would say about week 2 is we've got these squares involving, or these T-squares involving Pluto and Saturn. So like Saturn down here, he's in a square to Uranus, a square to up to Mars and Ceres in particular. He's also in a square to Mercury. We've got Pluto in a square to Pallas Athena, the South and the North Node. Now, Pluto and Saturn, if there were any planets that had to do with governments, banks, pharmaceuticals, police, education, healthcare, the hands behind all of that, it would be Saturn and Pluto. So Pluto is like complete power. Pluto is the energy of power. And if you want to know more about that, then check out my Pluto in Aquarius video that's on the Pluto playlist. I've also got Pluto through the houses, so you can see where it all fits in for you. But Pluto is where we find our power, our absolute power, and that yearning for power that some people have. Saturn is like the middle manager. He's like the vice president. He's not quite at the top, but really aspires to be there. So there's a bit of an arse licker in Saturn, I'll be honest. Saturn, you might ask yourself, what would Saturn do to get to the top? Pretty much anything. So wherever Saturn is, it shows where you'll go. I mean, also with Pluto more so, like Pluto's a lot less ethical than Saturn, but they both want to be at the top. So it's really interesting that both of these planets in this week 2, are in a series of T-squares connecting up to our personal planets and also the nodes. So it feels at some level in week 2, which I've said, is a week that makes us, we might feel alone in this week. We might feel like, we're isolated with this energy. It feels like we are being pulled away from the people around us. So in week 2, what I would say is find support as much as you can. Don't fall out with your friends and family. If you have a difference of opinion, find a way to just spend time apart. It's not worth ripping yourself apart right now, because to me it feels like there is a much bigger hand behind it all, really wanting us all to fall apart at the seams. And it doesn't really take much to push us over the edge. If you think about what happened around the time of the pandemic and beyond that, and how families and friends and generations and countries and religions, like everyone has been in this kind of place, or not everyone, I don't want to talk in like absolute definites, but people have been coming apart. This whole feeling of polarity and diversity and bifurcation has been playing out for too long now. We're not meant to be isolated. We are meant to find connection, seek connection, make and build connection, and build trust. In this week, in week 2, it is vital that we start to rebuild trust. And it might be difficult because we're not very good at having these conversations now, and when you go to, if you look at the media, or if you look at films and you look at popular culture right now, there are all these kind of, oh, you believe that? Oh, you must be. And there's all these kind of phrases that people just say now. So like you can't express something without being called a label or something like that. So really watch out for labels and just see beyond it. At the end of the day, we're all human and we do need to connect. That's just my 2 penny worth anyway. Week 3 then, let's have a look at week 3. What's coming up? And let's just see if anyone's got any questions. No. The great thing is I've picked a time to do this when most of my audience are at work and doing stuff, so I can just crack on with this. So week 3, yeah, there's more changes. So if we have a look, we've got the Sun and Mars in Scorpio still. They will be changing in week 4. In week 3, Mercury is in Sagittarius all month. Venus is in Libra all month. And we've got the moon going from Sagittarius through to Capricorn, Aquarius, and then ending in Pisces. So it's interesting because I always think that quadrant of the zodiac from Sagittarius to Capricorn to Aquarius to Pisces, you know, we've got like slightly what would I say? A kind of like it's non-personal thinking, you know, like Sagittarius, it's more philosophical rather than personalized. Capricorn, you know, there is this desire to get to the top, there's this desire to work, but it's not always like when you're working towards something, it's not necessarily to spite other people. It's kind of separated a little bit. Aquarius, you know, is very much about non-attachment, and then Pisces is quite disassociated, you know, as the energies go. So I always think this part of the quadrant of the zodiac is less identified with things and a lot more yeah, distractible, sure. And yeah, it's a whole different feeling to the rest of the zodiac, which is quite identified with core human emotions. So it's an interesting time. You know, we've still got the intensity of the Sun and Mars, and we've also got this Venus in Libra, which is very happy, and then Mercury in Sagittarius. Let's have a look at the overall times that I think are really, really strong. So the 15th and 16th, I haven't really paid too much attention to. They're minor aspects that are taking place that day. But the 17th, we've got Mars in a trine to Neptune, exactly. And, you know, the Sun is also, you know, has been in that connection as well. Then on the 18th, we've got Sun in a conjunction with Mars, exactly. And on the same day, we've also got the Moon in a conjunction with Pluto. Now, I think this day, the 18th, is super strong. And this is the chart that I've drawn up, actually, is the 18th. I think this is the strongest day in week 3, you know, and obviously the Mars and Sun energy, they've been in conjunction pretty much since the start of the month. You know, they've been moving around together. So this has been going all month and will continue to the end of the month. But right on the 18th, it's at its strongest. If you think Mars is, yeah, one of the rulers of Scorpio, Pluto is the other. Both of them have a lot of energy that is warlike and that is combative, that wants to fight, that wants to be stubborn, that wants to push forwards, that wants to dominate, that wants to control. And then we've got the Sun and the Moon. So like the Moon, our emotions, is in a conjunction, an exact conjunction on the 18th with Pluto. And then the Sun and Mars in an exact conjunction on the same day. It's like our ego and our emotions on that day are absolutely really forceful. What a forceful day. It just couldn't get any more forceful than that, other than the fact that both the Sun and Mars are also in a square to Saturn, pretty forceful. The Sun and Mars are also in opposition to Uranus, also very forceful. This is a hell of a day. And if you also have a look, you'll notice that Venus is also coming into an opposition with Chiron. It's not there and it won't strike for a little while longer, but it's already coming in. This is a super strong day with super strong astrology. Also, if you can see that the Sun and Mars are also in a sextile to Pluto and the Moon. So that energy is also working together. So, you know, if from a personal perspective, If you've got something around these degrees in Capricorn and the start of Aquarius, if you've got energy at the end of Scorpio and the beginning of Sagittarius, this is going to be a time when you can absolutely tie your goals in to something like a new direction that you're wanting to work towards. This is absolutely determined and rigid. This is absolutely lighting the fire. This is the match that gets it all going. This is very incendiary and moving energy. And given that it's in opposition to Uranus or in a trine to Uranus, there is change afoot. This is a deeply catalyzing day stroke week. This is massive. I don't know how else I can say it. And Mercury at this point is also in a lovely trine with Chiron. Now, towards the end of the week, Mercury actually is in a trine with Chiron. And I think this is quite helpful because, at the start of the week, we're feeling really kind of catalyzed. And with, I didn't actually talk about Mars in a trine with Neptune, but we've got this energy of taking action about what we're sensing and intuiting. Not necessarily a really good reason to take action, although I do obviously work intuitively. I always think, you feel something intuitively, you sense, you find out some information, then you take action, before, unless you're in an absolute emergency where you have to kind of flow based on your on what your instincts are telling you. But this is very instinctual. But I would say, we could be led down the garden path here, especially with all this, dare I say, manipulative energy as well, like Pluto in a conjunction with the moon. It can be highly, highly manipulative, using the emotions to get control, and then using the ego to take action. These can be highly manipulative. So this is very interesting energy. And then by the end of the week, we're getting a lot more of an idea of how we're going to make sense of any hurts or insecurities that have come up over this week. I think the second into the third week is just so strong that if what's already growing right now at the end of October, all of the talk about war and all of the talk about genocide and all of the othering that we're hearing in the news, like, if you think this, you must be one of them, all of this blame and shame. And it's a massive game, this is building between the second and the third week. And I think by the 21st, when Mercury's trying Chiron, we are absolutely desperate to make sense of what's going on. And, hopefully what's really going on is that we're able to keep the outside world on the outside. And actually we're using all this planetary energy to make personal changes. And this could be working out really beautifully for you. Again, listen to my breakdown of this, like horoscope by horoscope. If you know your ascendant sign, check out the update for your particular ascendant. Like mine's Scorpio, that would be the one I would listen to. You can also listen to your sun sign one as well. But when you find out where these are playing out in relation to your own chart, that will give you a much clearer idea as to how you might want to use this planetary energy. So put it to good use. So I think week 3 is all about power plays, suffice to say. Let's have a look at week 4. And week 4, you'll notice that we've got some movement. So the sun is now going into the sign of Sagittarius. That happens on the 22nd. Mars changes into the sign of Sagittarius on Friday, the 24th. We've got Venus in Libra still. And of course, Mercury is already in Sagittarius. So if you think at the start of the month, we had the Sun, Mercury, and Mars in Scorpio. Now at the end of November, we've got the Sun, Mercury, and Mars all in the sign of Sagittarius. So the energy of Sagittarius is firing up. And of course, Sagittarius is very, very fiery, not quite as much as Leo and Aries, but it's philosophically fiery. It stands strong. It stands for truth. It stands for insight. It stands for a greater context. It also stands for adventure, and it also stands for being slightly rebellious. And so all of this intensity of Scorpio is really passing away and coming into this energy of experimentation and having some fun. Fun is really important to the Sagittarius. And during this time, the moon moves from being in the sign of Pisces through to Aries, Taurus, Gemini, and then ends in Cancer. So, we're coming back round into the very sort of personalized star signs, so Aries, which is, very much about the identity, Taurus, very much about our resources, Gemini, about the way we're communicating, and Cancer, the way we're feeling, in sense of how we belong. So it's interesting that we're starting to get excited, philosophical, adventurous, and a bit more rebellious about how we see ourselves and how we're pitching and putting ourselves in this world. So let's have a look at week 4. Now, this is the week where we've got our full moon. We had the new moon in week 2 on the 13th of November. This is the chart for the full moon in Gemini, which you can see here. It's at 4 degrees in the sign of Gemini, and this is taking place on the 27th. But before I get there, I just want to talk to you a little bit about the planetary energy that's caught my eye for week 4. If I can find where my notes are. What have I done with them? Has it gone on the floor? No. Oh, well, I'll have to do this without my notes. Don't know where that's gone. Oh, well. Because I think week 4 is about, it's getting personal. Things are feeling very, very personal. I'll explain why in a sec. So on the 22nd, we've got the sun going into Sagittarius, and we've got this exact sextile between Mars and Pluto. Obviously, this is actually the chart from the 27th, but you can already see that Mars has moved on since then, but it would be right here at 28 degrees, and then it comes into this lovely sextile. This is a very, very strong day when the sun changes signs and Mars is sextile to Pluto. So the 22nd is a bit of a powerful day. Not necessarily stable, but very, very powerful for making things move. The 23rd, we've got the sun. Now, I mentioned this in week 2 and week 3, that as things come into the square with Saturn, that people often feel a bit lonely and out of sorts and not quite right in themselves. So we've got the sun in a square with Saturn on the 23rd, which really, I think, really epitomizes aloneness, the feeling of being alone. What I would say is, if this is showing up in your chart in any kind of major way, I would look to feel not alone, but how you can feel comfortable in isolation. So you might choose to do something that's very independent, so that you don't really channel on feeling kind of cut off. On the 24th, we've got Mars going into the sign of Sagittarius, which is obviously getting things moving again. And then on the 25th, we've got Mars square Saturn, which is pretty big. Obviously, the sun is still square Saturn. And then Saturn is in a semi-square to Chiron. Where's Chiron? Here it is. So a semi-square is when something is 45 degrees away from another planet. The semi-squares aren't very comfortable at all. They're very awkward. It shows where we're trying to do something and it's just really difficult to get it done. So we've got this desire to control things whilst also a desire to heal things, and they're really not working. So let's add up all this kind of cumulative energy. So we've got the sun square Mars, sun square Saturn, feeling isolated, feeling cut off. Then we've got Mars square Saturn, which, yes, we feel cut off and we're likely to take action, or, we will be wanting to do something because we feel cut off, so we may well find ourselves actually in disputes with people because we're feeling lonely. Mars in a square to Saturn is also quite combative, in particular, between you and authority. We might challenge authority. We might say, it's because of you, it's quite judgmental. And then, on the 25th, with all that going on, and also Saturn and Chiron in a semi-square, it's uncomfortable. It's not a very comfortable week 4. Then on the 27th, we've got the full moon. And of course, usually a few days before the full moon, we're already feeling full moony, where we feel like we're being pulled apart a little bit. And so we've got this full moon in Gemini. And this is what I really wanted to focus on. So for those of you who are an early Sagittarian or an early Gemini, this is going to have a lot of resonance and relevance to you. So in the same way as we had the Sun, Moon, and Mars and Ceres together at 20 degrees and the Sun is Scorpio on the 13th at the new moon. Now we've got Ceres, Mars, and the Sun together, but now all in opposition to the moon. So it's like a continuation of the feeling of, yes, we need to have a new start with how we organize, how we look after people, how we feel mobilized to take action about all things that are personal to us. And yet there's this crisis point. It's like whatever was birthed in us around the time of the new moon, 2 weeks later at the time of the full moon, it's grown, it's started to get legs, and it's not comfortable. It's grown too fast possibly, but it's not comfortable. When Mars and the moon are in opposition, it brings up so much fight in people. Like we feel emotionally justified to have a really over the top reaction. Anyone with Mars in a conjunction to the moon, a square or opposition are absolutely really quite fiery. They have these moments of blowing up completely. And so there is this is a very sort of blowy uppy kind of full moon. And it's all square to Saturn. So all of the squares that I've been talking about with Saturn, it makes us feel cut off. We feel angry. We are looking at authority, feeling angry and isolated from authority. We're also feeling isolated from each other. This is a very difficult energy. And of course, Pluto is still in its T square with the South Node and the North Node. Deeply uncomfortable. So at the time of the full moon, if I was in your shoes, which I'm not, but if I was, I would be looking at where the full moon is in terms of my chart, looking at where I might be feeling angry, where I feel I might be wanting to explode. Whatever is showing up is really an indication of where you've projected something that's from you onto somebody else. I think all oppositions have something to do with projection in them. It's something that we're not able to own in our own ego. So for instance, with this full moon in Gemini, the instinct is to go to facts and to rely on facts and to rely on information and to rely on gossip and to rely on hearsay and to keep busy so you don't have to focus on things, whilst also at the same time there is this deep need to feel the information and to understand the full context. And so at some level, there is this kind of ideological battle going on between people wanting to understand what this means for everyone versus a bunch of, it doesn't matter what it means because this happened, and look how many people were affected, and this and this. So there's a sort of split between rational thought and kind of practical embodied thought. There's this split between those that want to manage the way other people do things versus those that value independence and freedom to make your own decisions. So it's bringing up a whole bunch of schisms, which, to be fair, are probably already felt, already festering, already cleaved apart in your own inner psychology. So watch how you're feeling as this week 4 is coming in. Do something that allows you to feel like you're creating your own challenges. The worst thing about this, I think, in November is that people are feeling like they're being pulled apart, like they have no sense of sovereignty, like they have no authorship to write how their life is going to be. November, I think, in my own mind, is about us absolutely taking control of who we are and what our experience is going to be. And yeah, we can't guarantee that someone's not going to do something awful to us, but it's important that we start to take our own life into our own hands and try and live without being a complete jerk. I just added that in for my own sense of that's my own value. That's not necessarily yours, but this is a time for us to really feel like we're in charge and empowered in our own life. So do whatever you can to feel like you are understanding your world, and just be very wary of being pulled in these alternative arguments. It will be destabilizing, and that is really like being on a seesaw, isn't it? Being in that opposition in that full moon. At the end of the month, on the 28th, 29th, Venus is going into a conjunction with the South Node and is therefore in opposition to the North Node. And so she's bringing love to all of our karmic strivings. So the North Node is really about the direction we're heading in, the direction of humanity. The South Node is where we're coming from. You know, Venus is reminding us of our hard-earned generosity and love and connection. She's reminding us of all the times we've been connected, all the times we've felt loyal, all the times we've come together, all the times we've shared our pain and learnt from each other's stories. She is reminding us of our core inner compassion. And that is where, if I was in your shoes, I would choose to focus my attentions. So it's about, as far as I can see, about feeling like you're able to write your own life and taking steps to ensure that, whilst also not forgetting that you belong and you are important and you are part of a really important time in history. So there you go. That's my thoughts about the month ahead. The month of November, like I said, it's firework city. Very explosive. And very soon I will put in the month by month updates. And like I said, on Wednesday, I'm going live with Helen from Venus Health Academy. And then on the 31st on Halloween, I'm going live with Jasmina, who I've also had on this show. So loads and loads of love to you. If I can be of any help, then just give me a shout. Go to my website, it's feelgoodastrology.com, or drop me an email. It's louisatannermunson@gmail.com. You'll find all of that below. Anyway, sending you so much love into November. Please do use that beautiful new moon energy on the 13th to create a really beautiful possibility for yourself. But anyway, lots and lots of love to you. Take care and catch you another time. Bye for now.